The slap rang out across the Vantage Hotel's grand ballroom the way thunder does, sharp, unambiguous, silencing everything it touches. 300 guests froze mid-conversation. Champagne flutes stopped halfway to lips. A string quartet let their instruments fall quiet, note by note, like candles being snuffed in a row. Una Galbraith stood at the edge of the event floor, one hand pressed to her cheek, the other still holding a clipboard. She hadn't moved, she hadn't cried. She simply stood there, blinking, while the red outline of Greta Page's palm bloomed across her skin. "Maybe now," Greta said, her voice carrying the effortless projection of someone accustomed to rooms listening. "You'll think before you embarrass me again." 20 seconds earlier, a young server named Zara had slipped near the beverage station. A full tray of sparkling water lurched toward a cluster of guests. One of them a 7-year-old girl standing beside her mother, a community health charity donor. Una had been passing and reacted before Zara's own body could correct. She caught the near side of the tray with both arms, absorbed the momentum, redirected most of it toward the floor. Clean. Quiet. No one was soaked, no one was hurt. One half glass of sparkling water had splashed sideways onto Greta Page's gown. A single damp patch on silk organza, that was all. Greta had looked at the spot, then at Una, then at the room full of reporters, socialites, and city officials gathered for the Vantage Foundation's annual charity gala. She made her calculation in under 2 seconds. "This is inexcusable," Greta had said, and then she swung. The room remained silent now, not the practiced silence of well-mannered guests, pretending an awkward moment hadn't occurred. This was the held-breath silence of people who were uncertain whether what they had witnessed was real. Franklin Dewar stood near the entrance corridor with his hands laced behind his back, watching. He had managed operations at the Vantage for 11 years. He had seen the hotel host provincial premieres, international film crews, the occasional quiet federal investigation. He had never once watched a guest strike an employee. His expression did not change. His eyes moved to the staircase. Theron Cade had arrived 4 minutes ahead of schedule. He stood at the top of the descending staircase in a charcoal suit. No pocket square, no cufflinks, nothing decorative. He had not been announced. He rarely was. The Vantage belonged to him through 3 holding companies and a numbered corporation, and he moved through it the way water moves through its own pipes. Without ceremony, without permission, and entirely without doubt. He was taking in the ballroom below. Greta saw him a breath later. The satisfaction climbing into her expression collapsed so quickly it left no trace. She reset into a smile that had appeared on the covers of 3 lifestyle magazines. "Theron," she said warmly, "you're early." Cade descended the staircase without hurrying. The room parted for him the way rooms always did. Not because anyone was told to move, but because something in the quality of his attention made standing in his path feel inadvisable. He stopped in front of Una. She hadn't moved. Her hand was still pressed to her cheek. Cade looked at the mark. Then he reached into his breast pocket and removed a folded pocket square. It had never been displayed, kept flat against his chest. He held it out. Una stared at it. "For your cheek," he said. His voice was unhurried and entirely level, no anger in it, which was, Franklin Dewar would note later, far more alarming than anger would have been. "I'm fine," Una said quietly. "It's just a bit of color." "Take it anyway." She took it. She pressed it against her cheekbone, and the cool linen was a small, absurd comfort. Cade straightened. He looked across the length of the ballroom without urgency. The way a man reviews a document he expected to be in order and has found instead to be incorrect. Who saw what happened? No one leapt to answer. A handful of guests studied the floor. A city councillor developed a sudden intense interest in the centerpiece arrangements. 3 executives from the foundation's partner companies exchanged a glance and collectively chose silence. Greta stepped forward. She had recovered fully. The smile was serene. "I handled a staff issue," she said. "The girl was careless. These things need to be corrected in the moment, or standards slip. This is my event. I organized every detail for 6 weeks. When someone undermines the presentation we've worked toward..." "Mrs. Galbraith works for me," Cade said. The sentence was not loud. It was simply present, the way a wall is present. Greta's smile held. "Darling, she's a bookkeeper. She was interfering in the service. She was preventing a child from being knocked over." He glanced briefly at Zara, who had gone pale against the beverage station. "I have cameras in this room. I know what happened." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Greta recalibrated with impressive speed. Her expression softened into concern. "You're upset, I understand. But surely we can discuss this privately. We're embarrassing our guests." "You can wait for me in the East Corridor," Cade said. "Franklin will show you." Greta's composure flickered once, precisely, like a candle in a draught. Theron. East Corridor. She left. The room exhaled. Conversations resumed in careful increments, like an orchestra tuning up in segments, before anyone cues the full piece. Cade looked at Una again. She had lowered the pocket square. The mark on her cheek had faded slightly, but was still visible. She looked like a woman trying very hard to appear smaller than she was, which was something he had noticed about her before, without ever naming it. "Have someone look at that," he said. "It's truly not serious." "I'm aware. Have someone look at it anyway." He walked toward the East Corridor. Franklin appeared at Una's elbow 30 seconds later with a hotel medic and a glass of water. She accepted the water. She submitted to the medic, checking her cheek. She spent most of those 4 minutes watching the door, through which Cade had disappeared, thinking about her silent auction tally sheets. Because the numbers were wrong. She had noticed it 90 minutes ago, while reviewing the final donation records before the auction closed. The running total in the system didn't match her manual count from the bidding slips, a difference of $11,000. It wasn't a rounding error. It wasn't a data entry mistake. The pattern of the discrepancy, repeated across 3 small categories of items, had the specific shape of someone who knew how not to be caught. Someone had been skimming from a children's hospital charity for 2 years running. "Miss Galbraith," the medic said, finishing. "Ice it tonight." "Of course," she said, standing. "Thank you." She walked back to the operations desk, sat down, and started pulling the auction records. She didn't go through Franklin. She didn't wait for Cade to return from whatever was happening in the East Corridor. She simply worked, quietly, at the corner of a room full of gala guests, still processing what they'd witnessed. Her calculator and her 2 years of bookkeeping intuition and her absolute refusal to let $11,000 disappear from a hospital fund running in parallel with the social drama she had already decided not to carry home. By the time the silent auction officially closed, Una had identified the discrepancy's source, corrected the tally, flagged the anomaly in writing with supporting documentation, and set it on Franklin Duer's desk with a note that read simply, "Third-party review recommended." OG. She had also arranged for the winning bidders' certificates to be delivered correctly, ensured the charity totals were verified before the presentation speech, and quietly updated the evening's final program. The gala raised $467,000. 40 minutes later, a city official approached the podium and announced it as the most successful Vantage Foundation event in 5 years. The applause that followed filled every corner of the room. Una was in the back stairwell with a cup of hotel coffee, eating a triangle of brie from the kitchen remnants, because she had not eaten since noon. Franklin found her there. "You're not watching?" he said, nodding toward the ballroom, noise filtering through the ceiling. I know the total already. Franklin sat on the step below her, which would have seemed strange to anyone who knew his seniority, and said nothing for a moment. He asked about you, Franklin said eventually, before the event. He reviews all staff files quarterly. He said you had flagged an audit recommendation on the Kempton account 3 months ago that no one followed up on. He wanted to know if it had been resolved. It wasn't, Una said. I followed up myself. I know. He knows. Franklin folded his hands together. He also asked why you took this job. The questions settled in the stairwell between them. I needed work, Una said. Her parents had run Galbraith Accounting Partners for 22 years out of a building in Kitchener. 16 employees, a client list that included a regional hospital group, 3 municipal school boards, and a local manufacturing co-op. Solid, honest, small enough to be invisible, and large enough to be a functioning livelihood. 2 years before Una had finished her CPA designation, Page Group Holdings had begun acquiring the contracts of every small regional accounting firm in the corridor. They didn't buy the firm. They bought the clients, one by one, through competitive bids that undercut on price and then quietly reinstated their rates once the smaller firms had been starved out. Her father's firm lasted longer than most. Then the referral network dried up. Then the lease came due at an amount that was no longer manageable. Then there was nothing. She had spent a year trying to find work in her field and learning what it meant to have a resume that listed a dead company. She had taken what she could find. The Vantage had been posted as temporary through an agency, and she had walked in for a 3-month contract and stayed for 2 years because the work was interesting in ways she had never anticipated, and also because it paid enough to send money home every month toward a debt that was slowly, finally, approaching its last page. She had not asked questions about the nature of the hotel's ownership. She had looked at the books and understood, on a structural level, what she was looking at, and she had made a private decision to do her job honestly regardless of what surrounded it, because honesty was the only thing she had that couldn't be taken by bad luck. My family's firm closed, she said. Franklin nodded slowly as though this confirmed something. Page Group, he said, not a question. She stared at him. I never told anyone that. Mr. Cade runs due diligence on his staff. Franklin stood. He did yours 18 months ago when you caught the Marsden discrepancy and said nothing to anyone except the head of accounts. Most people would have gone around him, or said nothing at all. The discrepancy was real, Una said. It needed to be corrected. That's what he said when I asked him why he kept renewing your contract. Franklin picked up her empty cup. He said you correct things that need correcting, quietly, without waiting for someone to tell you it's your problem. He started back up the stairs. The report you filed tonight, he said, pausing without turning. He'll have it by morning. She sat in the stairwell a while longer after he left, listening to the applause filtering through the ceiling. $11,000, back where it belonged. She finished the brie. The following morning, Theron Cade sat at the desk in his hotel office and read Una's flagged report twice. Then he read her full employment file. Then he sat for a while without doing anything in particular, which was not something he did often. He had always known, in the abstract way one knows facts that have been filed and shelved, that Una Galbraith was exceptional at her job. She was methodical in a way that was rare. She didn't perform her competence, didn't build a narrative around it, didn't angle for recognition. She simply did the work and went home. She had flagged 3 accounting irregularities in 2 years that his own senior finance team had missed, in each case with a 1-paragraph memo that said nothing more than was necessary. He had also noticed, though he had not consciously examined it until now, that she moved through his hotel as though trying to take up the minimum possible space. In meetings, she positioned herself at the edge of tables. In the elevator, she stood to one side. She was always the last to arrive and among the first to leave. Not from rudeness, but from something that looked, from the outside, like an ingrained habit of not assuming she deserved to be in the room. He had an idea about where that habit came from. He read the page group file his researchers had compiled 22 months ago. He had not thought much about it then, because he had not known who Greta Page was. He had met Greta 4 months later, through a mutual business acquaintance, and her family's name had not connected itself to Una Galbraith's history in any way he'd noticed. It connected now. He pressed the intercom. "Ask Ms. Galbraith to come up when she arrives." Greta Page, meanwhile, had spent the previous night conducting a quiet campaign. She had not done anything dramatic. She was too experienced for that. Instead, over drinks at the after-party, over breakfast calls to 3 guests she knew well, she had murmured a gentle, concerned narrative into the right ears. She was worried, she said, about the bookkeeper. She'd noticed some irregularities in the hotel accounts. Nothing confirmed, of course, but it was the sort of thing one felt a responsibility to mention, and the woman had seemed so eager to insert herself into the evening's events, so eager to be seen. By mid-morning, 2 Foundation board members and a journalist from a national paper had heard some version of the story. By noon, the journalist had sent an inquiry to the Vantage's communications office. By 2 in the afternoon, Theron Cade had summoned the guests still staying at the hotel to the ballroom. Greta arrived with her publicist. She wore ivory. She carried confidence deliberately as an accessory. Cade stood at the front of the room beside a presentation screen. "There's been speculation," he said, "about the integrity of last night's events. I prefer to address speculation with information rather than denial." He nodded to the technician. The screen displayed the auction records, the original, the corrected version, and Una's documented analysis side by side. He walked through it in 8 minutes, without editorializing, without drama. He presented the $11,000 discrepancy, its source, and its correction. He noted that the full amount had been transferred to the Foundation's account before midnight. A second document followed. Una's employment record, her flagged irregularities from the past 2 years, and a summary prepared by his external auditors, confirming that her work had been accurate in every instance they reviewed. The final slide contained a single line. "All prior claims regarding account irregularities are unsupported by evidence." The room was quiet. "I also want to address what happened at the event itself," Cade said. His voice did not change register. "One of my employees was struck by a guest. That guest is in this room. This hotel has operated under a clear standard for 11 years. The people who work here are treated with basic respect. That is not a complex standard. It does not have exceptions for social standing or business relationships." He paused. "I'll be ending my engagement to Greta Page effective immediately. I've asked my solicitor to contact her family regarding the business arrangement that was contingent on it. Those discussions can continue independently." He said it the way one relays a decision already made, not as a pronouncement, but as an update. Greta's expression didn't crumble. She had too much practice for that. But the room saw the moment her eyes lost their certainty, the moment the architecture of the future she had assembled collapsed, and she understood, for the first time, that she had mistaken access for ownership. "You're making a mistake," she said quietly. "I've made several," Cade said. "This isn't one of them." Not one guest came to her defense, not the board members, not the business contacts whose names she had cultivated for years, not one person she had charmed the previous evening. Evidence is a difficult thing to argue with in a room full of people who have just seen it. Greta Page left the Vantage Hotel that afternoon with her publicist. and 2 pieces of luggage, and her family's name, and nothing that had ever truly been Cade's to give. Una was on the 4th floor when Franklin appeared in her doorway. "He'd like to see you," he said. "I have the Kempton follow-up to finish." "He said when you have a moment." Franklin paused. His version of not rushing means sometime in the next 15 minutes. She gathered her files. She took the stairs instead of the elevator because she needed the 30 seconds. Cade's office was not what she had expected the first time she'd seen it. She had anticipated something that announced itself, dark wood and framed acquisitions, and the physical vocabulary of power. Instead, it was spare. Bookshelves with actual books, a drafting table covered in site plans, windows overlooking the lake, grey today and enormous. He was standing at those windows. "Close the door," he said, without turning. She closed it. He turned. He looked at her cheek, which had faded to a faint discoloration, barely noticeable. He looked at it with the same attention he gave to things that mattered, and that he had not yet found a remedy for. "Sit down," he said. She sat. He remained standing. She had noticed that was how he thought, in motion or at the window or at the edge of a room, never behind a desk when the conversation mattered. "I'm going to offer you a position," he said. "I want you to let me finish before you decline it." Una opened her mouth, closed it. "My holding company has 6 properties and 3 subsidiary operations. My current head of finance is retiring in March. I need someone who does what you do, catches things, corrects them, doesn't manufacture drama around the correction." He looked at her steadily. "I've had that position open informally for a year. I kept not finding someone who fit it. Last night, watching you file an $11,000 audit flag 45 minutes after being struck in a room full of 300 people, I stopped not finding someone." Una looked at her hands. "I'm a bookkeeper," she said. "You're a CPA with 2 years of experience in an environment most accountants don't survive, and you've made no errors in that time that weren't corrected before I saw them. You're also one of the most structurally capable people in this building, and you've been working beneath your own level since you walked in the door." She felt something tighten in her throat that she hadn't been expecting. He named a figure. She looked up. "You'd need to move to the main offices downtown. Flexible hours for the first quarter. I don't expect instant results. I expect honest ones." Una was quiet for a moment. She thought about the desk she had sat at for 2 years, positioned at the edge of every room. She thought about the contract renewals she had waited for without ever asking. She thought about her parents' firm, the one that had operated honestly for 22 years before honest wasn't enough. She thought about her father's voice on the phone every Sunday, asking how she was, meaning a dozen things he didn't say. "You know about Page Group," she said. "I do. Greta's family." "Yes." She searched his face for something. Guilt, awkwardness, the particular quality of a man who has realized a coincidence too late. She didn't find it. She found only the same directness, and beneath it something that was not pity. "My protecting you last night had nothing to do with who her family is," he said. "I want to be clear about that." "I know," she said, and was surprised to realize she did. "This offer also has nothing to do with it." "I know that too." He waited. "I'll need a week," she said. "You have it." She was nearly at the door when he spoke again. "Mrs. Galbraith." She turned. "The work you've done at this hotel, the corrections, the flags, the quiet follow-throughs, most of it was never visible to the people it protected. I noticed it." He paused. "I want you to know that." She held the door handle for a moment. "The soufflés," she said. He blinked. "I'm sorry. Last night. After everything, I kept thinking about whether the pastry kitchen had timed the desserts correctly." She looked slightly embarrassed. It sounds absurd. Were they correctly timed? They were. Something shifted in his expression that wasn't quite a smile, but was in its neighborhood. The position downtown, he said. The pastry timing is someone else's concern. That, Una said, is genuinely disappointing. She left. Franklin was waiting in the corridor, professionally unsurprised by everything. Well, he said, I need a week. He said you'd say that. She stopped. What did he say I'd do after? Franklin looked at her. He said you'd take it. She was quiet for a moment. Did he say why? He said you correct things that need correcting, Franklin said, and that this building needs correcting more than it needs a bookkeeper. She walked to the elevator. She pressed the button for the 4th floor. She stood in the middle of the elevator car, not to one side. 6 weeks later, Una Galbraith's name appeared on the door of the head finance office at Cade Holdings' downtown tower. The sign was small and without ceremony, which was exactly how she had asked for it. The first thing she did in that office was sit at the center of her new desk and read through 14 months of financial records that no one had flagged. And that contained, she counted within the first afternoon, 9 inconsistencies that needed correcting. She corrected them. She wrote a summary that was 12 pages and 3 sentences of editorial comment. She placed it on Cade's desk on a Thursday morning, before he arrived. No fanfare, no covering note, because the work was the note. He read it before his 9 o'clock. He walked to her office afterward, stood in the doorway, and said, "The third inconsistency on page 4, how long has that been running?" "Approximately 22 months, she said, without looking up, "since before my time. And you caught it in an afternoon." The pattern wasn't well disguised. It was simply patient. She looked up. Someone was counting on people being too busy to look carefully. Cade leaned against the door frame. The city spread behind him through the window, bright and grey in January light. "People are often too busy to look carefully," he said. "I know," Una said. "That's why I'm not." He stayed in the doorway a moment longer than was necessary for the conversation. She returned to her files. Neither of them commented on this. The second Vantage Foundation Gala fell on a Tuesday in November, 10 months later. Una was not running the books from a corner desk this time. She was on the steering committee, which meant she had opinions about the catering contract and had expressed them clearly at the September planning meeting, and the head of events had changed suppliers, and the food was considerably better. She still knew exactly when the desserts went into the ovens. An hour before the first guests arrived, she found a young woman in a catering uniform standing outside the service entrance, breathing carefully. "First event?" Una asked. The young woman nodded. She looked about 20. "I keep thinking I'll drop something," she said. "Or spill, or trip." Una considered her. "You might," she said. The young woman looked up. "Things go wrong at events," Una said. "They always have. The question isn't whether something goes wrong, it's whether you know what to do when it does." She straightened the woman's collar slightly. "If something spills, stop it from reaching the guests. If something drops, get it off the floor before anyone steps on it. Make the smallest possible problem out of whatever happens." "And if someone gets angry?" the young woman asked. Una was quiet for a beat. "Then remember that their anger is about them," she said, "not you. Do your job. Hold on to that distinction, and it'll get you through most nights." The young woman took a breath. Some of the tension left her shoulders. Una went back inside. The gala was everything the Vantage Foundation had been building toward. The room was full. The speeches were short and the donations were not. A children's literacy organization presented their annual impact report, and 3 people in the audience cried, which Una counted as a success. Near the end of the evening, the young server from outside knocked a water glass off a table at the wrong moment. It shattered neatly. She went completely still. Una was there in 4 seconds with a cloth napkin and a calm expression. She crouched and began collecting the larger pieces. "Are you hurt?" she asked. The young woman shook her head, eyes filling. Then the important parts handled. Una looked up. "Get the dustpan from the North Service Station. I'll hold the perimeter." A moment later it was sorted. The nearby guests had barely paused their conversations. One older gentleman patted the young woman's arm and said she'd done fine. From across the room, Theron Cade watched. He was standing near the east wall with a glass of water, which was always what he drank at his own events. He was not watching the room the way he usually watched rooms, calculating, cataloguing, noting the faces and the angles of approach. He was watching one person. She had not asked for the evening to go the way it had gone. She had not positioned herself for recognition, or for moments, or for the specific kind of visibility that turns into a story people tell. She had simply been present, consistently and completely, in every room she entered. He crossed the room. She was back at the steering committee table, making a note on her clipboard when he came to stand beside her. Not in front, beside. "The water glass," he said. "Recovered," she said, not looking up. "No injuries, no staining, no report necessary." "I saw." She looked up then. He was watching her with the expression she had come to recognize over 10 months of working in adjacent offices. Not warmth exactly, because warmth was too simple a word for what it was. Something more specific, something that had been present for a while and was simply, tonight, not bothering to stay out of sight. "You're not watching the room," she said. "No," he said. The string quartet shifted into something quieter. Around them, the gala wound through its final hour. Easy and bright, the way evenings go when they've been built by people who care about the details. Una set her clipboard down. "The desserts," she said, "are going to be perfectly timed." I assumed. "I'm mentioning it so you know. I wasn't only thinking about the numbers." He looked at her. Something in the space between them had changed, in the particular way things change when two people stop pretending something isn't true. "What were you thinking about?" he asked. She considered the question with the same care she gave to everything. "I was thinking," she said, "that this is the first time in a long while that I've stood in the middle of a room and not tried to be somewhere smaller." He was quiet for a moment. "Good," he said. It was a simple word, unhurried, certain, carrying the same quality his voice always had when he had considered something fully and was no longer uncertain of it. The quartet played on. The chandeliers held their light. The Vantage Hotel held everything that came next, without comment, the way good rooms do, the way the best rooms always have, in the long, quiet history of things that arrive exactly where they were always going.